Time for the elimination stage pick'ems, and we got 5 out of 10. We're still in it. We scraped our way through that first stage, but that's all you need to do, okay? The 3-0s came in. We got a couple of our other teams, but first, before we get into it, a quick word from the sponsor.
When you prepare for a game, you need to take everything with you. Everything that gives you confidence in victory. Something inseparable from you, or something that inspires you. Your concentration is the key to success. With every second and every click, you're getting closer to victory.
You've got to be 18 plus, check the link below, and as always, gamble responsibly. Okay, now for a recap from this first stage. So Liquid and the Mongols making it through 3-0. Good to see. I expected they were the best teams. They did it. 0-3s, not great. I mean, Fnatic. Like, this is my worst pick by far, and even as I was making the pick, I feel like I didn't give great reasons for it, and I realized this might not be a good pick. But Furia, Pain, and Big all making it through. And now let's move on to this stage. And okay, I think first and foremost, there are quite a few teams that you're obviously going to pick. It's just a question of who you put as your 3-0. And I've not seen a lot of people doing this, but for me, MAU's 3-0 is the lock straight away. These guys are always so good. They're normally like the best team in these sorts of group stages. They're very consistent. The only issue this team normally has is struggling on stage and in big matches. And we've already seen them go ahead and beat who? They beat Na'Vi, right? Yeah, they beat Na'Vi in the previous Swiss stage. I just think this is the sort of stage of the tournament where MAUs are at their best, and Yimpat is just like so good on this team. Shuhei's a great in-game leader. I think they're just the safest, most reliable 3-0 pick here, because a lot of these other teams, I could see them losing a map, whereas MAUs, there's just so much consistency to their game. And I know people are going to say their form hasn't been as good coming into this, but I think having the time off is probably going to be really helpful for them. So for me, MAUs, a pretty obvious pick. And then my other pick, I'm actually going Vitality. Yeah, I'm not going Na'Vi here. I just think Na'Vi do way better when they have a lot more time to prepare for every opponent. And I also think that their firepower isn't the best of the best in the world, which can be maybe a bit of an issue sometimes in like a best of one. Whereas, let's say Na'Vi have a bad game and Vitality have a bad game. At least on Vitality, I feel like a Flames, a Spinks, a ZywOo can really just carry the team. On Na'Vi, yeah, they have those players too, but I don't think to the same extent. You know, Wonderful doesn't really take over games. JL can, you know, Bit can, but maybe not quite to the same extent as some of these Vitality players. And Vitality, obviously, just a very consistently good team. I think, honestly, there's a lot of teams that are just a cut above everyone else, so let's just put them in. Na'Vi are obviously making it through, okay? I don't even need to question that. They're just too good. Alexi B, great in-game leader. G2, they are going to make it. I think they were a little sloppy in the previous stage, but this team just have so much firepower. They'll probably go 3-1 or 3-2 because they will lose a series or a map somewhere because they're so inconsistent sometimes. Just with the way they play, round to round, it can feel inconsistent, but they have a lot to them. They just have so many good players. The question for G2 is, how does m0NESY do? Because he's had some stuff in his personal life recently. He hasn't been playing at his best. If he's locked in for this stage, okay, now we're talking. They could be a real contender. Who else? Spirit. Spirit, low-key, again, they have a lot of talent, and that game they had against G2 was very scrappy, but low-key, like, if there was a team that could maybe slip out, I actually think Spirit could be them. I just think that, yeah, they don't have a crazy firepower across the board, right? Like, Donk, very good, but Shiro sometimes actually goes missing. Zontix I like, but there's a world in which I can imagine the team play falling apart a bit, and if that happens, then they're in trouble, but I just don't realistically see it. They're just a bit too good across the board. They're normally pretty solid. Still, like, don't think they're in great form coming into this, but I think they'll be fine. FaZe, another one. there's a chance they lose some BO1s, right? That's a classic FaZe thing. But I think seeing Rain play so well in the previous stage is a very promising sign for this team. I think that will serve them well. And honestly, these 6 teams, you have to have putting through, I think. They're just too good. And it's just a question of who you put in 3-0 and who you put in the advancing section. Okay, now, moving on from that. There are now decisions to make between these next ones. And for me, the Mongols go straight in. They were so good in the previous stage. I already picked them as my 3-0. I genuinely think they're getting a crowd buff. I think the crowd is behind them, and we've seen that that can help teams and can affect opponents. And they're also just never scared. They're actually a very clutch team. It doesn't seem like they ever get negatively affected by the crowd. I just really like this team right now. You know, Senzu and Techno, very sharp players. 9-10, solid on the AWP. Don't think he's outstanding, but he's good enough. And then Blitz is just a great in-game leader. They always seem like they're on point. And yeah, just really good individually. I think this team, surprisingly, are a pretty good lock to make it through. I think they're a cut above the rest of these teams who I consider. And now, who is that final team? I think this is where it's up in the air. I think you've got to consider Heroic. Nertz was in ridiculous form in the RMR stage. They did lose against Big, though. That's a bit of a blight on their name. 3D Max are the big question mark. I could see them somehow making it through and just going crazy again after they qualified and beat G2. I could also actually see them going 0-3, weirdly. I think the opening games are important for them, and they don't get to carry that momentum through, which, you know, if they'd have played the opening stage and they got a bit comfortable, I think I'd have more faith. But without that, yeah, I don't know. And I don't think G2 were playing that well in the previous stage. So I don't think I'm going to go for them, but I don't hate it. Liquid, I think, are the one a lot of people are going to go with. But I still just think, even with Yakindar playing a bit better in the previous stage, he makes a lot of mistakes. Naf was looking really uncomfortable. He's normally meant to be a backbone, you know, of their firepower, a real reliable player. That didn't happen, actually. He was poor in the previous stage. And this is the sort of stage where Ultimate might drop off a bit. And then also, Twist's cooling is just not that good. There's a lot of rounds where the time comes back to bite them. They will lose at least 1 or 2 T rounds a map just due to time and not making a decision quickly enough. And so, I don't know about Liquid. They're in contention, but for me, I think I see them as like a 2-3 team right now. Gamer Legion's kind of an interesting one. I just don't know if they quite have the firepower at this stage, honestly. And yeah, they're solid, but like, I just don't quite see it happening. And then Pain, I actually think are a canny underdog team as well. MIBR also, I've seen people picking them 0-3. I would not put them 0-3. I think there's a world in which their players catch fire and they make it through. It's just such a hard thing to rely on, right? When there's so many good players at this stage, I can't bet on it. Whereas Pain, I like Big Uzera's calling. I think they also have a lot of talent. They have a lot of sneaky little trick rounds that they like to go for. And they do it in a way where it's never too complicated, but it always works nicely. And honestly, for me, I think it's between Pain and Heroic right now. That's who I have in my head. But I just think Heroic have that bit more. Okay? I know that they weren't that good in the previous stage, but a big part of that was Dexter underperforming. I don't think Dexter underperforms again. I think he is a good AWPer. I think he will step up in this stage. I also think he's someone who does a little better under pressure a lot of the time. And alongside Nertz, alongside Kicksam being a good in-game leader, Tesses normally pretty solid, Shush just very reliable. I think they're just the most well-rounded team. For me, they should consistently be the best team out of this bunch, and so I've got to go with them. And now, the 0-3 picks. Okay, the other thing with Heroic, by the way, their opening matchup is that rematch against Big, where they lost the BO1 last time. But I'm hoping they've learned from that. I think they will have learned from that, and they should be okay. All right, the 0-3s. I think there's a maybe 3 teams that I have it that it's really between. Okay, for me, Big, Wildcard, and actually Furia. And you could maybe slip like MIBRs in there and Gamer Legions in there. But for me, Wildcard, I'm sorry, I have to put you in there again. I know I didn't believe in you in the last stage, and it costed me. But I just don't think that the players are like that good. They were better than I expected, but they're still not quite there, right? Like, Susp has been good. Fozy's still been hit or miss with the AWP. Sonic's been winning clutches, but like you look at the other teams in this stage and you just think they should have more firepower across the board. And Stanislaus calling, I think, is good, it's still, I don't want to say, it's like a little, not simple, but like, it's good and effective, but I feel like they're winning rounds against these weaker teams because these weaker rounds are messing up. And Stan is making the most of that, but I don't know if that works as well at this stage. And they also don't have like the craziest executes or something where I'm like, yes, they can make up for that lack of firepower. And for me, that's the biggest issue. And the other team, between Big and Furia, I think I have to go Big. I was pretty underwhelmed with their T sides at this previous stage. They were playing very hesitant, very nervous, just leaving a lot of rounds late and just like messing them up, which did not look good. And also their entry players aren't even doing that well. Like Rigon has been really, really hit or miss and oftentimes missing pretty big. On T side, he's been a problem for this team. And I think he can improve, but I don't know if it's going to happen for them quickly enough here. And even Searson, I think, had a bit of a drop-off. I just didn't quite see enough overall from Big to really convince me coming into this stage. And I actually think a lot of these other teams are quite stacked. So it's not really me saying that Big are terrible. It's just that I don't think they have the individuals to just completely carry them through. And I don't think team play-wise or tactically they were that good. Whereas an MIBR, for example, dude, Insani can win this team a best of one, right? That's why I can't put this team 0-3. The individuals on this team will just run over a team at some point here. I almost guarantee it, you know? And Furia, I think they just looked a little better than Big in terms of having those individuals that can carry. And also, they just have this canny ability to grind out wins at this stage with the experience. So I don't quite have them as 0-3, but that's me. I'm locked. I feel pretty good about this. I think a lot of these teams up here are very, very likely to make it in these spots. And honestly, if you take something away from this, people are sleeping on this Mouse 3-0 pick. They're always so good in Swiss stages, guys. They're always so good. And I know that they didn't have the best tournament coming into this one ahead of the RMR, but I think that they've had that time off. They will have recovered. Let's lock it in. Thank you guys for watching. Diamond, coin, let's go, baby. It's coming. It's coming.